Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano, and I have been fascinated by conversations for as long as I can remember. Long before having conversations on the radio was my living, it was my passion. I would love to listen enthusiastically to talk radio. One of my favorite things to do when I'm in a diner or a restaurant is just eavesdrop on the conversations that are having behind me. When people come up to me at a party and want to have a conversation, I'm always trying to think, what can we do to get the most out of that conversation possible? What can I do? And I consider myself a student of conversation, not only because I want to have great conversations on the radio, but because I want to have great conversations with people that I meet in real life. That's why Dr. Paula Marantz Cohen's new book, The Talking Cure, an essay on the spirited power of conversation, was of such interest to me. And I've been wanting to talk to her for a while, but in light of the fact that we've now had the second assassination attempt on a presidential candidate in 65 days, it strikes me that maybe we need to do a better job as a country figuring out how to talk with one another, especially people that we may disagree with, as opposed to trying to shoot one another. So I'm very, very pleased to welcome someone who is not only a student, but a teacher of the art of conversation. She also happens to be a distinguished professor of English and the dean of the Pennoni Honors College at Drexel University, and her book, as I mentioned, is The Talking Cure, an essay on the spirited power of conversation. Dr. Paula Marantz Cohen. Dr. Cohen, it's great to talk with you.
It's great to be here, Frank.
We all have conversations. Most of us have a conversation at least every day. A lot of us don't think about it. Why write a book about it? What sparked your interest in thinking about the idea, the concept of conversation?
Well, like you, I am someone who loves to talk to people. And although I like deep conversations, substantive conversations, I also like chit-chat, and I like more superficial connections with people. And it struck me, as you said, that our country, perhaps our world, is sadly becoming more and more deficient in conversation. And that's a joy in life, as well as a resource that we will miss if we lose it.
Let's start with the basics. What makes a good conversation? Whether we're talking a deep conversation or short chit chat, whether we're talking a radio interview or a conversation between, a parent and a child or a husband and a wife, what's the key ingredient? Give us the pro tip for what makes a good conversation.
I guess it's when the two people involved are truly able to listen to each other, where they're not talking at each other, and they're bouncing off of each other. In other words, someone says something, you don't just wait to say what you want to say, you build on what they said. And it's amazing to me how rarely, or I guess rare it is, to find people who are able to do that kind of, it's almost like playing tennis, going back and forth, but always responding to what the other person has served you. And without that, you can't really have a good conversation.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. But as best, so it may seem counterintuitive, but if you want to be a good conversationalist, what your research shows is that the best way to do that is to be a good listener.
Absolutely, to listen and to take off from where the other person has been, and to show that you've listened and that you've taken it in. You may not agree entirely, but you can take something from it that you can build on, and that is both. It's a source of it makes people feel seen and heard, and it's a way of creating a connection that is really important in our society now.
Talk to me about your research for this book, The Talking Cure. Obviously, with almost a seemingly infinite number of conversations happening every day, there's no shortage of material to study, not only now, but throughout history. How did you pick which conversations to study, to research, to look at? And how do you know what's a good conversation versus a not so good conversation?
Well, I did do a kind of a historical overview of people or groups that are known for conversation. And Dr. Johnson in the 18th century, who was considered the most knowledgeable man of his age, loved to retire with friends to his favorite club and talk for hours and hours. But, there have been groups that have developed around various topics. I have a whole chapter devoted to different kinds of conversation connected to groups. So groups around a magazine like the Partisan Review, or groups around other kinds of, the Harlem Renaissance. Those were a group of people that got together and spoke and encouraged each other's art. So there have been the Romantic poets, for example, lived near each other and spoke to each other, and that inspired their poetry. I think that creative people mostly need conversation to help them to spark their creativity. Not everyone, I should say, because I think there are people who feel that conversation can deplete them from doing their art. But for the most part, I think it really encourages the creation of art or insight, to be able to talk to somebody who shares it, not necessarily your point of view, but your interest in life.
At 30 minutes after the hour, you're listening to The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Paula Marantz Cohen. Her book is The Talking Cure. Since you mentioned Dr. Samuel Johnson, who is widely regarded as one of the great wits, and he's one of your models for a good conversation, what made his conversations so interesting, so good, so worth taking note of? What did those conversations include that a lot of other conversations don't?
Well, I don't know that he would be the model for everyone, but he was a wit. He was very clever. He knew a lot. He could be intolerant. He would never meet David Hume, for example, because Hume was an atheist and Johnson was a believer. But I think that he really did relish his friendships and enjoyed sitting with them, drinking with them, eating with them. I have a chapter on food and conversation because I think it really is a helpful adjunct, as well as drink, to getting people relaxed so that they can talk. So certainly Dr. Johnson liked his food and drink, and he liked to be surrounded by his friends. I think he suffered from melancholia a bit, from depression. And for those of us that do suffer from depression, I think conversation with people who are like-minded can really lift us out of ourselves.
Does food and drink significantly aid when trying to have a conversation, maybe especially a difficult conversation?
Well, I think so. I mean, having children, I would say that one of the things we found, my husband and I found, was useful when we wanted to talk to our kids was to take them out to dinner. And it seemed to be easier in that setting to talk to them. But in general, I think there's nothing like good food and drink, or even not so good food, to make people feel relaxed and congenial. And I personally love to eat and drink, and I like to sit around a table and not feel that I'm responsible for serving or cooking or whatever. So I like to go to a restaurant with friends, and I think that's one of the great joys of life. I do like good food and a nice environment, but I think you can also be in a diner or a hamburger place and have a great conversation too.
Oh, I think there's a lot to be said for diners, but I would certainly...
I love diners, yeah.
I would certainly agree. There are far too few of them these days. You mentioned Dr. Johnson as being one of the great wits, and a lot of the other folks in your book almost seem to have a natural ability to have conversations. Are there some folks that are just born as naturally skilled communicators? Or can all of us, whatever we're starting with in terms of conversational ability, can all of us improve? Is there some level of predestination in terms of our conversational ability?
Well, I think a little bit. I mean, you said yourself that you have always loved to converse, and I'm the same way. And I guess I'm an extrovert, and I assume you are too. And we get our energy from other people. Mm-hmm. But I do think that everyone can become better at it and find that they enjoy it more if they work at it, which is to say they go out of their way to talk to people that they might not normally talk to, that they might dismiss, which I really think is one of the things that we're doing more and more of in our society, and it's terrible. We dismiss people because they don't agree with us as opposed to trying to engage with them. And then try and listen to them and find some point of correspondence or some point where we can identify and use that as a way to make a connection.
If you're just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Paula Marantz Cohen. Her book is The Talking Cure. I'm so glad you mentioned the importance of disagreement. And I know you spend a lot of time on this in the book. And one of the things that concerns me, particularly in media, where it seems like whatever your interest or whatever your political persuasion or whatever your age is, you have the ability with the internet and with cable news and talk radio to some extent to essentially surround yourself with an echo chamber and a bubble where you never hear anything that ever challenges your worldview. And I think that's very troubling. And I actually try to go out of my way to find contrary opinions to my own, or just, even if not opinions, just contrary perspectives, people with different interests. I'm wondering if you can speak to that, the importance of disagreement in conversation.
Well, I don't think you can really have a great conversation if you agree entirely with somebody else. I mean, as two different people, there are always going to be areas of disagreement. And what I find annoying about our current, I don't know if I should generalize and say our current society is like this, but there does seem to be this tendency to expect the other person to be 100% agreeing with you. And in the book, I do talk about one of my best friends who I met when I first began teaching. I knew him for 30 years. He died a few years ago. He and I had completely different backgrounds, completely different politics, but we were able to have a very close friendship and converse, very, very frequently over lunch. And now that he's no longer around, he died, I hear his voice in my head sometimes. So whenever I get too adamant or reflexive about certain points of view, I hear him telling me what he would think on the other side. And it's been very helpful. I think it humanizes people who other people would tend to dismiss because they don't agree.
No, that makes sense. There are obviously a lot of issues that people are very passionate about. I mean, some people are passionate about Mets versus Yankees. A lot of others are willing to, scream until they're out of breath over the conflict in the Middle East. Obviously, the political disagreements are significant. Cultural issues, medical issues. There's no shortage of hot button topics that are important to people, that are very serious, but that people have wildly different perspectives on. How do we do that? How do we discuss and disagree with people on important issues to them and still behave in a civilized manner that has everybody shaking hands at the end of the day and walking away friends?
Well, I'm not saying that it's easy or that it can always be done, but I think if you show goodwill and are genuinely curious, why do you believe that? Why do you think that? I really would like to know. And, this is where I stand, but I'm certainly open to learning more. Taking that point of view, I think, is the way to go. I don't think it's necessary to talk about heavy topics all the time. And sometimes if you start by finding points of agreement, as I said, or deal with disagreements that are more frivolous, you can move gradually to talk about more serious things once the friendship or the conversation deepens.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states, and MLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
That makes sense, and I think it's for people wondering how to get along with political differences at the Thanksgiving table or any holiday situation with family and friends where those confrontations sometimes seem inevitable. At the start of our conversation, Dr. Cohen, you talked about being able to enjoy the short, kind of breezy conversations as well as the more substantive, deeper ones. Small talk is something that has gotten a very negative reputation over the years. People always kind of roll their eyes when you even mention small talk. Is that important, conversations about, how long it took you to drive somewhere, what the traffic was like, what the weather was like? What's your view on what we generally call small talk?
Well, I think all talk between people is connecting, and so for some people, that's the way they connect with others, or it's the way they begin to do so. And I don't denigrate it. I don't think you can jump right into a deep conversation with somebody. I think you need to use these, little things, the weather, the traffic, and so forth, as a way to make a connection and realize that the other person is a human being that you might want to know better. It also can help you. I mean, I'm a student of Jane Austen, and she her world is full of small talk and little ceremonial type interactions. And the point is that it allows people to gradually get to know each other and decide whether they want to know each other better. So I think small talk is that way in. And you start with that, and then you begin to sense if the person has more to say or wants to say more, or if you're interested in them. But, you can't just jump right in or you're going to antagonize.
One of the best ways, or most common ways, I should say, that people tend to communicate these days tends to be through their smartphones. There's a lot of SMS text messaging going on. There's a lot of social media correspondence. It's not unusual for me to observe in a restaurant a family of 3 or 4 and have all of them on their smartphone with presumably communicating with people that aren't at the table at the same time, instead of actually talking in real time with the folks that are there. Can you speak to that aspect of it? Smartphones and social media, what have they meant for conversation?
They have been a killer of conversation. And as a teacher, I will say that the smartphones and the computers in the classroom are a very negative force. They're a barrier. Not only do they distract students, even if you have a text that you're dealing with on the computer, they're so tempted to go and, go on eBay and look and see what's on sale. But I really feel it's important as a teacher to not have them have their computers or their phones available. I can't prevent them from having phones, but obviously I will tell them, I don't want you on your phones, I don't want you on your computers, I want you interacting with each other, at least for the hour of the class. And I will say that students seem to appreciate that. They feel tethered to this apparatus, and they really want the face-to-face interaction, but it's hard for them unless they're told not to. And that's why I think it's very important for parents to limit phone use for their children as well.
It makes sense. And, on our block, my son is 2.5, but a lot of the other boys on our block, they all have these tablets. And it's just the most frustrating thing in the world when it's a beautiful day outside and he wants to play with all these other boys that are older boys, and they're all, very welcoming to him. But they stay on their tablets outside, and because he wants to do what they do, he's drawn to these devices that they're holding. It's very frustrating. I haven't figured out how to navigate that whole.
Maybe you should talk to the parents and say, why don't we have an hour in the afternoon where everybody doesn't have their technology and just plays outside? Because I have a granddaughter who's 2, and she's not at that point yet, but I hope, and they haven't allowed her to watch television, which I think is very funny, but because it's going to happen. But I do think that it's a real scourge on our young people, and a lot of them tell me that they hate it. They hate social media, but they don't know how to extricate themselves from it.
I could tell you, being in radio where there's so much pressure from management, from guests, from other folks to utilize social media to market the show, and it's in a very measurable way where you could see clicks and impressions. I can absolutely empathize with that. There's a lot of great things you could say about social media as a tool for entertainment and connecting with folks and for organizing, but it can be, you feel like it's just a total rat race. All right. So we talked about social media and smartphones. We talked about not listening. What are a couple of obstacles that you've observed other than those two to a good conversation? What's stopping people from having good conversations beyond what we've just mentioned?
Well, there are people who are not able to have a conversation. They can only pontificate. And I don't know, you can't really deal with people like that. I mean, they are always waiting to give their point of view. And that can really be stultifying, and I don't know. I don't know how to deal with people like that. But it's just. I also think that there are people that are afraid to talk about certain issues because they think that they'll be too incendiary. They'll create too much difficulty, so they veer away from anything that has substance to it. I don't know if everyone can be brought into the fold of conversation. I do think having a drink or two and a nice meal with somebody will loosen them up and allow them to perhaps get over some of those fears and phobias that they may have about connecting with somebody in an authentic way.
Lastly, you do profile a couple of people that were conversation killers. You do talk about folks that were not conducive to free expression and so forth, and to conversation in general. You mentioned Hitler, you mentioned Stalin. I don't think there's anybody that would disagree with either of those characterizations. But one person you mentioned, and I know the Wall Street Journal spent a lot of time on this in their review of your book, which was generally positive, that I was a little surprised to see you mention was is Ronald Reagan, nothing having to do with his politics, but Reagan always usually gets high marks for his ability to communicate with people. They called him the great communicator. And to your point, the stories of him having drinks with the Democratic Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, have sort of become legendary as the golden age of differing politics that no longer exists these days. What was Reagan's problem? What did he do wrong in terms of communication or conversation?
Well, he may have been a great conversationalist with Tip O'Neill. I don't know. But what I think from the point of view of our media, of our culture, that he did that influenced what has happened since, is that he really pioneered a certain kind of public relations with a message of the week and a line of the day. And he would have his people and himself hammer those points home over and over again, so that the spontaneity of, the serendipity of a press conference that to some extent used to exist before was destroyed. And I think it was brilliant public relations because he got his message across that way. But from the point of view of, controlling conversation, if you control conversation to that extent, you kill it. That doesn't mean you can't communicate well, but you're not going to have a conversation, say, between a reporter and a politician if you're going to be sticking to one message, which I think Reagan did brilliantly.
Interesting. Well, it certainly gives you a lot of food for thought in terms of thinking how we got to the era that we're at, especially when it comes to political communications. I've been talking with Dr. Paula Marantz Cohen. I do hope people check out her book, The Talking Cure, an essay on the spirited power of conversation. Dr. Cohen, thank you so much. I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you'll come back.
I thank you, Frank.
If you want to comment on any portion of our talk, you can give me a call at 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.